close your eyes for a moment. Imagine waking up in a world with no coins, no paper bills, no credit cards, and no phones to pay with. You have food, clothes, tools, but no money exists anywhere. This was once real life. Early humans hunted, farmed, built, and survived in small communities. But one problem followed them everywhere. People often needed things they could not make themselves. And the solution they found would eventually change human civilization forever. Without money, people relied on trade. Grain for meat, cloth for food, tools for pottery. It seemed simple, but barter carried a hidden weakness that made everyday exchange surprisingly difficult. And there is one fascinating truth about how money was born that many people never hear. I'll keep that secret for now and reveal it near the end of this video. Barter worked until people wanted something the other person did not need. Imagine you have wheat and want a pair of sandals. You find a sandal maker, but he already has enough wheat. He wants a clay pot instead. Now, you must find someone who has a pot and also wants your wheat. This problem is called the double coincidence of wants. Both people must want exactly what the other has at the same time. And that made simple trade slow, frustrating, and surprisingly difficult. Imagine Aaron, a farmer with plenty of wheat, needing new sandals. The sandal maker does not want wheat. He wants a clay pot, but the pot maker wants a goat. Suddenly, one simple purchase becomes a chain of trades. Aaron may have to visit several people before getting what he needs. Barter was not only inconvenient, it could turn everyday life into a frustrating search. People slowly realized they needed something better than barter. It had to be something almost everyone would accept, even if they did not need it immediately. It should be easy to carry, difficult to destroy, and valuable enough to trade for many different things. Most importantly, it had to be something others would willingly accept. No king invented this idea overnight. Across different places, communities began experimenting with objects they believed others would also want. And from those experiments, the first forms of money slowly began to appear. Different places found different answers. Some communities used salt because it could preserve food. Others traded shells, animal skins, cattle, grain, or measured silver. These objects were useful, scarce, and widely accepted. They looked nothing like the money we know today, but they shared one important feature. People were willing to accept them even when they did not immediately need them. Then something even stranger began to happen. A shell could pass from one person to another, even when the new owner had no immediate use for it. A piece of metal could do the same. Ordinary objects were becoming symbols that could carry value from one trade to the next. Somehow, people had discovered a way to turn simple things into something far more powerful. But why did this work? That question would follow money for thousands of years. More than 2,600 years ago, in the kingdom of Lydia, a new idea appeared: official metal coins. Made from electrum, a natural mix of gold and silver, each coin carried a stamped symbol of authority. That mark told people something important. This coin was official, recognizable, and accepted. For the first time, money could travel easily from one stranger to another. What made these coins revolutionary was standardization. Before coins, traders often had to weigh metal and judge its quality during every exchange. A stamped coin changed that. Each coin carried an official stamped symbol, often connected to royal authority. That mark acted like a guarantee. People no longer had to weigh or test every piece of metal before trading. They could recognize it and accept it more quickly. In a world where strangers were beginning to trade across greater distances, that simple stamp helped turn metal into something far more powerful: reliable money. Coins spread quickly from Lydia to Greece, Persia, Rome, and beyond. Trade became faster, markets grew larger, and people could sell to one person and buy from another. Money was no longer tied to a single exchange. Coins did more than make trade easier. They changed how entire societies worked. A farmer could sell wheat to one person, keep the coins, and later buy tools from someone else. Soldiers could be paid regularly. Builders, teachers, and craftsmen could earn money for their work. Markets expanded, cities became busier, and long-distance trade grew faster. For centuries, coins helped economies become larger and more connected. But coins had a weakness of their own. They were heavy. Carrying a few was easy. Carrying hundreds was tiring. Carrying thousands across long distances could be dangerous. As trade expanded between cities and regions, merchants needed a safer, lighter way to move value. That problem opened the door to one of the biggest changes in the history of money. More than 1,000 years ago in China, merchants faced a growing problem. Carrying heavy coins over long distances was slow and risky. So they began leaving their coins with trusted merchants or early bankers and carrying paper receipts instead. Those papers represented the money stored elsewhere. Over time, the idea became official, and governments began issuing paper money. Suddenly, a light sheet could represent the value of hundreds of coins. Money had become easier to move, but something fundamental had changed. The object people carried was no longer the valuable thing itself. Chinese rulers eventually turned the idea into official currency. Paper money was light, portable, and far easier to use than bags of coins. A single note could represent a large amount of value. But this convenience came with a new risk. The paper itself was almost worthless. Its value now depended on something people could not see inside the paper: the promise behind it. Paper money worked only as long as people believed in it. But some rulers discovered they could print more notes whenever they needed money. At first, that seemed useful. Then too much paper began chasing the same amount of goods. Prices rose, savings lost value, and confidence weakened. In some places, people stopped trusting the notes altogether. The lesson was powerful. Removing metal made money easier to use, but it also created a new danger. If too much money appeared too quickly, the entire system could begin to break down. And history would repeat this lesson many times. The idea of paper money did not remain in China. Over time, travelers and merchants carried stories of it westward. European banks began issuing their own paper notes, often promising that each note could be exchanged for real gold or silver. People slowly accepted these notes because they trusted the institutions behind them. Money was becoming lighter, faster, and more abstract than ever. As banks grew across Europe, people began storing gold and silver in secure vaults. In return, the bank gave them paper notes, promising that the holder could come back and exchange the note for real metal. Soon, people stopped making that exchange at all. They simply passed the notes from one person to another. The paper worked because everyone believed the gold was still there. This system helped money travel farther and faster. But it also created a new question. What happens when the promises become larger than the gold behind them? Over time, this promise became the gold standard. Paper notes could be exchanged for a fixed amount of gold, giving people confidence that money was backed by something real. The system helped trade expand across countries and oceans, but it also created a limit. If governments needed more money than their gold reserves allowed, the entire system came under pressure. The gold standard seemed stable, but it carried a serious weakness. A country could only create as much money as its gold reserves could support. In peaceful times, that limit felt manageable. But during wars or major crises, governments suddenly needed enormous amounts of money for soldiers, food, weapons, and rebuilding. Gold could not always keep up. The system that once created confidence now became a constraint. And when the 20th century brought wars on an unprecedented scale, that pressure would push many countries to make a historic choice. The world wars pushed the gold standard to its breaking point. Governments needed far more money than their gold reserves could support. So many suspended or abandoned the system. Money was moving toward something new, a system no longer tied so tightly to precious metal. If this shift surprises you, comment gold below, because the next step changed modern money forever. In the 1950s, another change arrived: the credit card. Instead of carrying coins or paper money, people could pay with a small card and settle the bill later. One famous story tells of businessman Frank McNamara forgetting his wallet at dinner. An embarrassing moment that helped inspire Diners Club. Money was becoming easier to use even when it was no longer physically in your hands. Then came 1971, a turning point in modern financial history. The United States ended the direct convertibility of dollars into gold, breaking the final link between the world's most important currency and precious metal. From then on, the dollar, and eventually most modern money, depended less on gold and more on confidence in governments, central banks, and the financial system. Money no longer needed a direct link to gold. Its value now depended on an enormous financial system connecting governments, banks, businesses, and ordinary people. By the 1970s and 1980s, plastic cards were becoming part of everyday life. People could walk into a store with almost no cash and still buy what they needed. Then computers and the internet pushed this change even further. By the 1990s, payments could happen online from home. Money no longer had to be held, counted, or even seen. It was becoming numbers on a screen, moving instantly from one account to another. Yet one thing remained unchanged. Banks still controlled the system. Then, in 2008, a mysterious name appeared online with an idea that challenged that foundation. In 2008, during a global financial crisis, someone using the name Satoshi Nakamoto published a short paper online. No one knew for certain who Satoshi really was. The paper described a new kind of digital money called Bitcoin, money that could move directly between people without relying on a traditional bank. Instead of trusting one institution, the system would rely on computer code, mathematics, and a shared network. It was a radical idea, and it raised a question that still matters today. What if money no longer needed a bank? Bitcoin existed only in digital form. There were no coins, no paper notes, and no central bank printing it. Instead, its rules were written into computer code and shared across a global network. People could send value directly to one another. But how could strangers trust digital money without a bank? The answer was blockchain. Blockchain was the idea that made Bitcoin possible. Imagine a public record shared across thousands of computers. Every time Bitcoin moves from one person to another, the transaction is checked by the network and added to that record. Instead of trusting one bank to keep the books, many computers agree on what happened. Once confirmed, the record becomes extremely difficult to change. No single person controls the entire system. In this way, blockchain tried to solve an ancient problem in a completely new way, creating trust between strangers without requiring one central authority. Bitcoin also introduced another unusual rule. Its supply is limited. Unlike traditional currencies, no government or central bank can simply decide to create unlimited new Bitcoins. The system follows rules written into its code, with a maximum supply of 21 million. Supporters saw this scarcity as protection against uncontrolled creation. It gave digital money something older currencies had long relied on, a sense of limited supply. In 2010, Bitcoin entered the real world in a surprising way. Programmer Laszlo Hanyecz paid 10,000 Bitcoins for 2 pizzas, worth only about $40 at the time. Years later, as Bitcoin's price exploded, those same 10,000 Bitcoins would have been worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The story became legendary, not because someone bought pizza, but because it proved Bitcoin could actually be used to buy something real. A strange digital experiment was beginning to behave like money. Bitcoin's success opened the door to a much larger crypto world. New digital currencies appeared, each promising different uses and possibilities. Some investors made fortunes, while others lost everything. Governments and banks began paying close attention. If you think money will become mostly digital in the future, comment "digital" below. Because we are now getting close to the secret I promised at the beginning. Crypto forced the world to face a question that had been growing for thousands of years. What actually makes something money? Is it the material it is made from? The government behind it? Its scarcity? The technology that controls it? Or is there something less visible, connecting every form of money we have seen? To answer that, we have to look back at the entire journey. Every form of money began as an answer to a problem. Barter was difficult, so people found objects others would accept. Coins made exchange easier, but they were heavy. Paper solved that problem. Technology made payments almost invisible. Bitcoin then challenged the need for banks themselves. The form changed again and again. But one thing never disappeared. Shells, coins, paper, gold, cards, digital payments, and Bitcoin look completely different. Some have physical value. Some have almost none, yet all of them have been used as money. So, what could possibly connect them? And here is the secret I promised. Money has never truly been about shells, gold, paper, or computer code. Its real power comes from trust. A currency works because people believe others will accept it tomorrow. Across thousands of years, the form kept changing, but the foundation never did. Money is, above all, a shared agreement between people. And the story is still not over. Today, digital payments, cryptocurrencies, and central bank digital currencies are pushing money into another new era. In the future, cash may become less common, while value moves instantly through phones, networks, and systems we are only beginning to understand. But whatever form money takes next, the same question will remain. Do people trust it? Technology may change the shape of money again and again, but without shared belief, even the most advanced currency is nothing more than numbers on a screen. Money is not the only thing built on shared trust. Language works in a similar way. Words have meaning because people agree on what they represent. Every English story you hear, every new word you understand, adds something valuable to you. Unlike coins or paper, that value cannot be lost in a market. It becomes part of how you think, communicate, and understand the world. From barter to Bitcoin, the story of money is really the story of human trust, creativity, and change. And your journey with English works the same way. One word, one story, one small step at a time. If this video taught you something new, tell me in the comments what surprised you most. And if you enjoy learning English through powerful stories like this, subscribe to Woven English. The next journey is already waiting for you, and it may change the way you see something familiar forever.